Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of I Am Christina DiArcangelo. And today with me, I have my guest. I'm so excited to have on Mike Mejer. Thank you, Mike, for joining me today.
Thank you for having me on, Christina. I feel like this was a long time coming, so I'm super excited about it.
It sure was. I mean, we kind of got into the anniversary podcast shoot, and now here you are.
Yeah, so thank you for having me on. It's going to be a good time.
Thank you for joining me. I really appreciate it because, we've been working together now for some time across the enterprise. And boy, have I learned a lot from you over this entire time period that I've been working with you, not only in the PR space, but also obviously in the patient advocacy space, as you are my vice president on the executive side of the board for APA.
I appreciate that. Thank you. And it's definitely mutual. And we were just talking about this before we came on air, but there were just so many different things from a patient advocacy standpoint, from a clinical research standpoint, where, I would offer or suggest different things or recommend different strategies here and there, but I would always go back to you and say, okay, but Christina, from a clinical standpoint, is this okay? Are we okay to move forward on this? So it was just a really interesting experience. And it still is today. I feel like we both just learned so much along the way.
That's what I love about our team. Thank you for saying that, because I feel like our team really is one of those that is very, we're gritty. But we say when we don't understand something, we gladly talk about it, right? And we solicit, feedback or helpful mentors, which is why we have the buddy system in our organization. But I love the fact that we're not afraid to be vulnerable, right, with each other. And like, there's times I write something and I'm like, I don't know, Mike, does this sound like a contract? Does it sound like a clinical protocol or an informed consent? Because that's what I'm good at writing. I'm not sometimes so good at writing some of these articles that I have to write because, you're like, Christina, it's important to share this point of view. People want to read it. And I'm like, okay, I'll try.
Yeah. And that's why we work together too, just to make sure that we're always aligned and we're always educating and bringing, what for many people is some unbelievable insight and perspectives because they don't live and breathe this stuff every day. Whereas for you, it's just another typical Tuesday. And so that's where I kind of come in and just say, wait a second, I know this is just another day for you, but this is really important. We should really shed some light on this. So it's always cool just to get those golden nuggets out of you and kind of just put them down on paper and then bring them down to that. And we always talk about this, that 8th grade level where everybody and their mother can understand it, whether or not they have a background in science or biotech or clinical research. And I think that's going to be a very important catalyst for general adoption or mainstream adoption of medical cannabis, cannabinoid therapeutics, and everything else that we're involved in.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things before I hit that point, one of the things I wanted to make sure I brought up on the podcast is the fact that sometimes PR people get a bad rap. Right?
I'm very well aware of that. Yep.
And one thing that I can say for sure about you is that you'll never have that bad rep because
I appreciate that.
Yeah, because you constantly lead with your head and heart when you work, and there's no blurred lines for you, either it's right or it's wrong, and that's it. And there's no I should check. No, it's right or wrong. And I love that with you. And like, even sometimes I've said some things to you, like, I'm like, I think we should think about talking about this. You're like, hold on, wait a sec. We've got to think about positioning ourselves to the best ability. So that way it doesn't look like we're coming out of left field all of a sudden talking about this, whatever topic it is at hand. Lately, the educational aspect of cannabinoids and endocannabinoid systems and terpenes. Geez, I've said a lot of cannabinoid words today. But like, we get behind that because we have to explain this to the patients. And it's really important that we read things out there that are factual, that is being presented to these patients, because there was something that we talked about before we came on today that I had noticed a couple of weeks ago, and I was hot because it was something that was supposed to be educational regarding a research that was done, thereby looking anecdotal without any actual data. And there were no sources, and it looked like an advertisement to go to a certain guy to get your medical cannabis card. And so I'm like, I don't understand what that has to do with this, because again, let's go back to that 8th grade level with the patients. What would a patient conclude if after reading that article, would they conclude that this is the truth, what they just mentioned about drug-drug interactions in the cannabis space against traditional pharma products when it hasn't been studied? There have not been clinical studies out there. I have not seen any, and I'm in the thick of it.
Exactly. And it's so important because for a couple of reasons. One of them being that some of these companies that do these things, sometimes they do them deliberately because they want to portray this public facing persona as being responsible for XYZ and doing all these grand things when in reality they aren't. But then other times they also do it unintentionally because they're just genuinely trying to get this information out there. With that, you also have to make sure that you're doing it in a way where to a complete novice, it's very clear and there's no gray area and it's black and white that maybe you are the one that has powered this study, or maybe you aren't the one that's powered this study, but you just want to share it so that your community or people who are going to see it can have access to that information. And to add to that, one last thing, there are still plenty of people out there that I talk to on a regular basis. They will still say things like, okay, so CBD doesn't actually get you high. And I'm like, right. So there is still a lot of education that needs to be done. And that's just one example, kind of a reference point as to how much more education and how much more of the right education needs to be put out there to make sure that the messaging and the narrative around each of these cannabinoids is correct and gets to people in the best, most effective and efficient way.
Mm-hmm. And it's proven, right? Like it can't just be, well, we realize CBN helps with sleep because a bunch of our patients have taken CBN. And now all of a sudden, guess what? That works for sleep. Well, that's not how it's done. Like we have to be careful about what we talk about and how we talk about it so that patients aren't misled to believe that if they haven't seen a clinical study that supports CBN for, sleep, for example, that, they might not want to just assume that CBN helps with sleep, even though we've seen scientifically, there have been some research studies regarding CBN and sleep, for example, even back to some, rat studies and mice studies. I almost said rice, merging the word rat and mice together in CD's brain fashion. But you know what I'm saying? Like you have to be careful about what we say. And like what we do with APA and our patients is we try to give them all the different resources that they need. Dr. Dawson, we're lucky to have him on our board because he actually is a scientist and publishes papers based on different things that are the endocannabinoid system, for example. He just wrote one of those for us that we're going to put on the APA website to help teach people that, yes, indeed, we all have an endocannabinoid system. Imagine that. It's not something that all of a sudden we had in our body and we never knew we had before. We had it there the whole time. It's just that it hasn't been talked about the right way. So, okay, how do we work with the endocannabinoid system? How does traditional pharma products work with the endocannabinoid system, if at all? So, these are the things that we have to try to explain to people based on actual research, though, not hypothesis.
Right. And one of the cool things about this entire ecosystem of companies, or as you referred to it, that like across the entire enterprise, is that every single entity has a different niche or a different perspective, because one handles clinical research, another one handles nutraceuticals, another one handles precision telemonitoring, right? Another one handles patient advocacy. And so being involved in all of these different limbs of the organization, you're able to get an understanding of how this affects this and how this one interacts with this one. Even if it's not, clear as day the first time around, over time, you start understanding, okay, the reason we need to make the telemonitoring do this is because patients over here are unsure about XYZ. And so I say all of that just because it's really important to have that 360 holistic perspective when dealing with patients and subjects in different studies, or just trying to help patients and point them in the right direction. from the APA or Affinity Patient Advocacy side of things.
I love that you say that, because remember when you first started working with me, and it was and it was before we had built this entire enterprise, so to speak, like meaning Spectral was obviously already there. We were doing things. We had the EDC, the ePro, the Tele-Monitoring skeleton was built already at that point. And then I had the brand. I launched the brand a little bit before you started working with me on that. But I was just like, a little toddler with that, like just trying to figure out what I was supposed to be doing and listening to you try to guide me the best way you could, trying to understand who I really am, because with all these different companies and all these things, there's a different side of CD every time I show up on a Zoom based on what we're talking about, right? Like when we talk about our patients, boy, we all kind of get like, we're there. We come out from that curtain and we're like, listen, we've got to fix this. This is unacceptable. Why does a patient have to spend $2,500 to confirm that they're autistic when they've already taken an autistic test? Because somebody's got to get paid to give you that rubber stamp. Well, I mean, come on. Like that just doesn't make sense, does it? But we're here to get involved in these kinds of situations so that we can help make sense for these people that need it most. And I love that you now, like, I turn it over to you a lot of these times in these meetings where we're talking about stuff. I'm like, listen, Mike has it down. He works across. Well, I did say walks, because you walk across, but work across all these companies. And it's a lot. I mean, I remember when we launched the magazine, I sent you just this like whatever one-off text message. Oh, by the way, the DR, can you do a magazine press release on the magazine? Because we're getting ready to launch that tomorrow. What magazine?
I first went through I went through my emails and my inbox, and I was thinking to myself, wait a second, I couldn't have missed this because this isn't something that I could miss. And then I went through my texts and I was like, no, I have no idea what's going on. And then I triple checked myself. And that's when I texted you and I was like, well, sure, but what is this? And so that's when we were like, okay, things are moving really, really fast. We need to, regroup on this.
Yeah. And it was like, and I love that you're so flexible to that, because it's crazy sometimes. All of a sudden another product comes out, or, oh, we've got to worry about this clinical trial. So-and-so needs us to work on a social impact budget. And we now might have to figure out from a PR standpoint, how we're going to handle recruitment. How are we going to work with the bots and the AI side of the team? How are we going to get APA up? Because we're executive oversight, because we're executive board members, and so it's like, wow. And now with all the stuff that APA is doing, which is so exciting, because when we first talked about it, about I asked you to join the board, I'm like, this is where I wanted to go. Hopefully we'll get there. Do you remember?
Totally. And it's really cool. And I think you and I were talking about this the other day too, just to see the entire project or vision, whatever you want to call it, just come completely full circle from the day that we started talking about this, and how patients were going to, kind of go through this flywheel, if you will, of, first they come in, we figure out, what's going on. We have access to all of these incredible clinical trials. Our network of just medical professionals, doctors, all these incredible people is so robust. And so we were really sitting on a gold mine. And it's really nice to see everything finally falling into place and having a great team on board to help support that.
Yeah. And I have to second that. And I'm just so glad that you're part of the executive team, on APA, that
thank you.
You really shepherd it through, and like, this is a special skill set to be able to do the things that we do. So it looks seamlessly, but it's a lot of work. We do a lot of work. We have a lot of meetings, good meetings, though, like not meetings just to have meetings. We make decisions, believe it or not, in our meetings, and we move on to the next thing, because that's how we work. We cannot sit here and talk about it for 25, months. We're working with patients. We've got to make decisions that are best and move forward swiftly. We can't be caught up in bureaucratic stuff. That's not how we work.
Yeah, totally. And I think one of the things that actually I wanted to bring up to you and kind of ask you was, with APA, like how are you able to kind of just create a vision for everything and then like map it all out? Because there's so many different moving parts. Like, does it come best for you when you're able to sit down just by yourself, or is it when you maybe have like a little mastermind group with maybe, one or two other people and talk it out? Like, what's your process for creating roadmaps and kind of outlining these things? Because I'm just curious how that process works for you.
Thank you for asking me that question. I think it depends on the situation. Like for example, let's talk about the metaverse, right? That's a good one because we're on that together, you and I and Tiff and obviously Rye Russell. When one of our other board members came to us and said, listen, I think we should get into the metaverse. Maybe we should rent a metaverse. It was a rent. Let's rent the platform, remember? And so we all got on the meeting. Even Jose was on. Remember, we're talking through logistics. Who has one that we can rent? Tiff and I ended up talking to that one of the people that had one of the metaverses because it was a woman. So we thought, hey, let's come in as the woman leaders that we are. We're tech people. We're patient advocates, researchers. Let's just bring it in. So we met. Remember, we met with her. And we were kind of just trying to like put the breadcrumbs out there, if you will, right? We were trying to figure out what was going to be the best option for APA at this point. Then we all came back together. And I don't know what the heck happened. All of a sudden, it went doom, bonk, crown down. And I go, what are we talking? Why are we renting anybody's metaverse? Why wouldn't we build it ourselves? We have an entire digital tech arm to our Spectral, our company. We have the AI bots, the Metacrawler bots, all this stuff. We have all this. Why wouldn't we do it ourselves? Why would we pay someone else for something we don't own? Where's the value for us, across Spectral affinity, there is none. So we're going to create it ourselves. And it just happened organically. It was us trying to figure it out, us trying to find an easy solution, realizing, well, maybe the easy solution is just for us to build one, even though it's a big undertaking, but we have the staff to do it. And we have a vision, of what we want this bad boy to do. And the stuff we've already been able to figure out that this thing could do, it just keeps going because you know what? We're all passionate about what we do. Like we really are. And so I think that that's what motivates us when we're tired and we feel like, God, we've been doing a lot of work trying to find this kind of patient population for this study. And oh God. And then we're trying to get people to work with us on certain things and it's not happening as fast as we want it. And we get like, but then these kinds of moments happen. These aha moments happen when we're like, aha, we're going to take this and we're going to do it.
Yeah, no, totally. And I definitely, and I was actually thinking about this the other day. I forgot where I heard this phrase, but mental athleticism was kind of the phrase that I heard. I think I forgot if it was on a podcast or something, but the point of it was that this whole journey of business, entrepreneurship, or just whether it's APA with a nonprofit, these are things that don't just happen. You reach a milestone and then it's over, right? You keep going. It's an ever evolving marathon. And so one of the things, and you and I always talked about this, was especially as it relates to mental health, just being able to persist and keep going, even when the stress, even when the anxiety kicks in. Like, how do you do it? You always tease me because I love taking walks. And sometimes if you call me, you'll hear me with the birds in the background and all that. But that's one thing that I think has just been such a game changer when you're able to realize that there's never really this ending that we tend to sometimes trick ourselves with. And it's all about, okay, how can I sustain this momentum? How can I sustain this movement? And just being a part of APA and kind of talking to you about it. And I remember when we were doing Clubhouse last year, or could have been a year and a half ago, just talking about these kinds of things helps so much. And so that's why, especially around May, when it's Mental Health Awareness Month, everything that APA does is just very transparent. We like to just give as much information, as much knowledge as we possibly can from the board members, from the team members, from the patients that we communicate with. And I think what we're doing has legs, and it's going to go really, really far, especially in the next 12 to 18 months.
I think so too. And I love that you brought up the mental health thing, because that impacts all of us personally. Every single board member, we're all impacted, whether it's us or someone in our family or someone we know, or all the patients we've helped thus far in the mental health space. How many of them have we helped, especially during the COVID times, the palliative long haulers that have mental health issues? And then, just my brother dying this year, from COVID, but because of the fact that he blew his heart out with the opiates because of mental health issues, schizophrenia and bipolar disease. And it's not an easy pill to swallow when you watch your family members go through these struggles and you're there to help them, but they can't take your help. They're just so far down. And I think, that's one of the things that I think feeds us with the metaverse build out that we're doing with the Patient's Paradise, is that we want a safe place for people to come to feel like, okay, I can talk about my truth. My truth might not sound like your truth. My truth might sound, like it's going off the deep end, maybe, or my truth might sound like I'm up in the trees with the birds and the bees, but that's my truth. And that's how I feel. And these patients don't have that ability right now, especially the depressed patients with MDD, major depressive disorder, who can't get off the couch, and even go to their doctor's visits, or even get on their iPhone to click that button for their Tele-Monitoring visit that they are supposed to be having with their psychiatrist. This is a way for us to really impact change in a very positive manner, for no reason other than to help people, not because we're trying to make money off of this, because the metaverse is free for our patients and all the patients that we impact.
Exactly. You nailed it. That's what it is. There's so many resources, especially with all the different limbs of the company, that it's so easy for us to point somebody in the right direction, whether we're directly tied to it or not. But there's always so many, just an abundance of resources available to us. And I think that's the coolest part about working with the team that we have, because everybody has a very unique skill set. Like, for example, Tiffany Watkins, Lady Canna, she's just unbelievable. She can just hold it down and make sure she sees things through all the way. Because a lot of times we can come up with these ideas and we can kind of, strategize and put together a plan, but just having her on board is an unbelievable asset to help us make sure that we see things through and see things through the right way. Especially with her tech background. It's just unbelievable. So special shout out to her. I really appreciate working with her. It's a lot of fun.
She's on the other side of our exec board, and it's so nice to have her also on the executive board. So like when we meet, Mike, Tiff and I, we have the best time talking. Like, guys, that's one thing that we want to make sure you understand about us, is that who you see us today as, on the Zoom, or you're listening to us, this really is who we are. Like there's good days and there's bad days. Today Mike and I look great, but there's sometimes we show up, we can't even be on camera because, oh Lord, we were doing something that, the day before that put us over because we're trying to meet some project deadline, because there's so many deadlines that we have to adhere to because of what we do in the back end, which is the patient side of things. And I want people to realize that we really are who we say we are, and what our missions are for these companies tied to us personally. So we actually like to show up and have meetings together and talk with one another. We care about each other. We're a family. Like we were talking about earlier, the sisters are these organizations, because I'm the female CEO. So that's why they're sisters. I know. But like watching you and Rye in some of these meetings, we have them together. We're talking about maybe CD, the brand, or we're talking about the book or whatever we're talking about. It's so much fun when we come on and we talk together, because there's always something going on that we can giggle about, like it could be something very crazy, like what Rye told us last week, which we can't say on air because it's, a crazy thing, but he was caught up in it because of somebody in the dispensary. And it was like, you and I are like, what?
Yeah, it's great, because the other day when we all met, I was focused. I was there, but I was just out of it, just out of being exhausted and tired and whatnot. And I remember we went around and you asked me a question or whatever. And I was just like, I got nothing really new. And all of a sudden, Rye just started busting my chops for the rest of the meeting. And I even told you after you called me afterwards. And I was just like, that was my afternoon cup of coffee, just being able to just just joke around and get work done with you guys was really refreshing. And just being surrounded by people like that, even if I, bust my chops sometimes, it's all out of love and it's a lot of fun. So
Yeah,
that just, it makes the work so much more doable, and it makes it so much more enjoyable along the way.
it
Because
does.
it's not rainbows all the time.
No.
That's for sure. But having a solid team that you can lean on and make sure that, you support them when times get tough and they support you, that's key to everything, I think.
That's the name of the game. And what's crazy about our team is, while people listening or watching us, they probably think we work full time together all the time. We don't. Mike Mejer has a book of clients. CD and the enterprise isn't the only thing he has to work on. So he has to juggle a lot of different hats. And we are high maintenance because we've got a lot of stuff going on. But like, even there were times when, I was working through maybe some of my custody stuff, and I had to call and talk to you about some of this stuff personally, because I had to bounce some ideas off of you about like, hey, does this make sense to you, just from a human to human perspective, because I trust you. And obviously you want what's best for me and my son and everybody, even my ex-husband, like, seriously, it's not just about us. It's about the whole family unit that has now been, I don't know. I don't even know what to say, but you know what I'm saying? It's not the same anymore. It's different. That's a best way to say it. Right. And you've been so instrumental in a lot of this stuff. And you don't even have a kid yet. And all these times I say to you, wow, Mike, when you have a kid, you are going to be an amazing pop, because, the way that you are with my son, that I see with Krish at times, and just like things I've talked to you about, there was something we were talking about this morning that I just got your opinion on, to make sure I'm not missing something, because maybe I'm missing something. I'm a female. I grew up as a girl. I was not a boy, in any parts of my lifetime. So I don't know things sometimes. So, sometimes being able to talk to you, also, you do for me the same. When I need help, you help me too.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah. I mean, that's what we're all here for at the end of the day.
I love that. Well, Mike, with that, you and I can talk forever, of course. Because there's always something going on. But I want to thank you so much for being on today and sharing yourself with everyone. You were on the anniversary special that we shot, which was so much fun.
That was a blast.
And now we get to be on again together this time. So I thank you so much for taking time to talk to me today and sharing a little bit about yourself with all of our viewers and listeners.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. This was a lot of fun, like always. And I'm excited to listen back to it and have some good laughs as well.
Me too. I can't wait to hear the sound bites that I almost said, Mike, that Rye Russell is going to pull out from our podcast, because I'm sure it'll be some good ones. So with all that, please remember, we are the same. I am Christina DiArcangelo. Thank you for joining me today.